Hey mathematicians, this is Mrs. Shopper coming with the third section in chapter 4. This is the last section before we have your quiz. And so you should be studying those note cards. We're going to talk about that more in class. Have people quiz you, have your parents quiz you, but it's important that you do use that time to reach out to your parents and see what they can help you with, okay? So here we go. Congruent triangles. Congruent triangles. So some vocabulary for you. Congruent. What does that mean? Figures have the exact same size and shape. That's congruent. Okay, I know you talked about it in 7th grade. It was a couple years ago. We're good to go. Congruent polygons. They're polygons that have all the parts of one polygon congruent to all the corresponding parts of another. It includes angles and sides, okay? This is what you call the congruence statement. When you do your congruence statement, it's very important that your corresponding vertices line up, all right? So that means that A is the same measurement of angle D, and angle B is the same measurement of angle E, and C is the same measurement of angle F. So making sure that you indicate that is important. That's going to matter. So if I ask you to write a congruent statement for 2 triangles and they don't line up, it is not technically correct. All right, so what is the definition of congruent polygons? 2 polygons are congruent if and only if their corresponding parts are congruent. That means their angles and their sides. Again, here's an example of a congruent statement. Notice with the angles, it's got 1 hash or 3 hash or 2. Those line up. Same thing with the side lengths. This is something for your note card. All right, CPCTC. This is a reason that we're going to be using in our proofs a fair amount. I need you to practice it. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. We shorten it by saying CPCTC. I need you to know that it means corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, okay? So if these 2 triangles right here are congruent, their corresponding parts, angles and sides, are also congruent. That's what that means. So here we have 2 congruent triangles. It says that ITP is congruent to triangle NGO. So here's what I do. Just to help me out, I and N correspond, and T and G correspond, and P and O correspond. I like to highlight it or maybe rewrite it so that it looks similar. I don't want anything playing tricks on my eyes, okay? And so that helps me see which parts are congruent because the corresponding parts are congruent. So what I need to do is find the values of X and Y. So here's my Y. I know that O and P are corresponding, which means they're congruent. So the measurement of angle P is the same as the measurement of angle O. The measurement of angle P is 40 degrees. The measurement of O is 6y minus 14. And now I'm going to solve that equation out. 54 is equal to 6y. Y is equal to 9. The next one I need to figure out is going to be X. X is the next one. So I'm going to shrink this. Whoops. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit. I'm going to move it off to the side. And here we go. So X minus 2y goes between N and G. So that's going to be the same as 7.5. Because again, the colors are helping me see which parts correspond, which for me is super helpful. So I'm going to say that 7.5 is equal to x minus 2y. Well, I know that y is 9, so 7.5 is equal to x minus 2 times 9. 7.5 is equal to x minus 18. I'm going to add 18 to both sides. X is equal to 25.5. I had that issue with a previous video. 25.5. That's my X value. Again, making sure you're showing your steps, making sure you're showing your process. That's really important as you go through this. All right, here is another theorem. Notice the note card. This is one you want to put on your note card. It's called the third angles theorem. And what that basically says is, hey, I've got two congruent triangles, right? And the two angles in one triangle are congruent to two angles in another triangle. The theorem states then that the third angles are also congruent. So if I have two triangles with two sets of congruent pairs, then the third angle in each triangle are also congruent. And again, because it's a theorem, that means it can be proven true. And so we could go through a process of proving that true. So let's talk through this. Here's an example of a proof, okay? So on your paper, I want you to create a two-column proof. Okay, so statements. We haven't done much of this at all, so I'm going to walk you through. We did a little bit with algebra, but we haven't done anything with geometry. And so we're going to be starting to build on that now that we're meeting all within the same model, all taking part in the same conversations. I think we're able to do this. I think this will be good. So what do I know? I'm not going to write anything down. What do I know? I know L and P are congruent. I know LM and OP are congruent. Okay, so got that. So I need to prove that triangle LMN and PON are congruent. So what am I missing here? Well, in addition to my given, I can say that LNM and ONM are congruent because of the vertical angles theorem. So that's going to be helping me. And in order to prove them congruent, I need to have three angles and three sides. So I can use my third angles theorem to show that O and M are congruent. Okay, so I've got my plan. I'm going to walk through it now and write it all down. Here we go. Number one, I'm going to say that angle L is congruent to angle P. I'm going to say that LM is congruent to PO. I'm going to say that LN is congruent to PN. And that MN is congruent to OP. So what I'm doing is I'm writing down all of the given statements. Now, when you do a proof, sometimes you write them all down at the same time. Sometimes you stagger them. It's all personal preference. I like to stagger them for when I'm going to use them. Okay. Step two, I mentioned that the vertical angles are congruent. So I'm going to say angle LNM is congruent to angle ONP. And the reason I can say that is because of the vertical angles theorem. Again, we talked about that earlier. So the vertical angles theorem. I can then say that angle M is congruent to angle O. And notice how I don't put the M in front because it's not a measurement. I'm naming the angle. And the reason why those two are congruent is the third angles theorem. Okay. If you can hear my kids in the background while I'm recording, my apologies. They're having a little discussion about something. All right. And then number 4. Now my last statement, because now I have enough information to prove that all those two triangles are congruent. And so with this, I'm able to say that triangle LMN is congruent to triangle PON. And the reason why is that corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. And this is how you say the proof. Notice how my proof statement is identical to the very last statement in my proof. Okay, so now you're going to get some time to work on it. We're going to be doing some proof practice next week. You don't have to look for one on your quiz tomorrow. There won't be one, but just be aware we're going to start setting the stage to getting you set up with that because I totally think you can handle it. All right, so you have a fantastic afternoon, and we will chat soon.